I have a surprise for you. I'm not preaching on what Larry read. That's another week. We're just ahead of ourselves. I think Jill's dad was messing around with the readings today.
It was, because I couldn't find it.
I'm going to preach on Luke 5, 1 to 11, which is a fish story. And it's the story of the crowds pressing in on Jesus. And he sees two boats sitting at the shore, and the fishers had gone out on them the night before and were washing their nets. And he gets into one of the boats, and it happens to be Peter's boat, who's, of course, at that point named Simon. And he asks him to put out a little ways from the shore, and he sat down and taught the crowds from there. One of these days, I'm going to sit down and teach this crowd from a seat. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into the deep water and let down your nets." And Simon answered him. Simon, who was something of a master fisherman, lets this rabbi get into his boat, and now he knows about preaching, does he know about fishing? And he says, "Master, we have worked all night, but have caught nothing. Yet if you say so, I will let down the nets." Can you hear the tone?
Yeah.
When they had done this, they caught so many fish that their nets were beginning to break. So they signaled their partners in the other boat to come and help them. And they came and they filled both boats, so that they began to sink. And when Simon Peter saw it, he fell at Jesus' feet and said, "Go away from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man." For he and all who were with him were amazed at the catch of fish. And so were James and John, sons of Zebedee, partners with Simon. Jesus said to Simon, "Do not be afraid. From now on you will be catching people." When they had brought their boats to shore, they left everything and followed him. And Larry, we're going to use your readings, just not yet. In 1986, a discovery was made on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. And they discovered a boat that they thought was about 2,000 years old. And they told that from I guess, the wood and the way it was put together. It was buried in the sands deeply, and I don't know if they carbon date wood, I have no idea how that all works. But anyway, they think it was about 2,000 years old, which would make it just a little bit older than this fish story that we read. And I'm going to ask the fisher people here, and I know Joe is among them. The boat supposedly was 7 feet wide, 26 feet long, held 15 men.
Wow.
And all these fish. How many fish is that? That's a math question. How many fish is that? A lot. That's an English teacher answer, a lot. So they have this big boat that begins to sink. But that's not the point of the story, is it? We are now at the end of the season of Epiphany. Next week, we begin Lent. 6 weeks ago, on Epiphany Sunday, we had the first Epiphany. You all remember what it was, right? Okay? The philosophers from the East came and found the Christ child. And they also found out who Herod was, and they went back a different way. Then we had the first Sunday after Epiphany. And what happened that Sunday? It was the, shall I tell you all?
John the Baptist.
It was the baptism of Jesus without John the Baptist. Because this was from Luke, and in Luke, John the Baptist is already in prison. But the important line we remember from that, our Epiphany that we went home with, was, "You are my beloved child. In you I am well pleased." And we took that to heart. And then next week we had a reading from John. And in John we don't have miracles, we have signs. John doesn't refer to them as miracles. We had the sign. The first sign was at the wedding feast of Cana. Okay, keep this in mind, Steph, when you guys are out celebrating this wedding later. If you run out of good wine, you've got to find a good wine steward. And at the bequest of his mother, we have new wine. And that's the first public miracle, the first recorded miracle. Another sign, another epiphany of who this man, Jesus, is. The third week, we're back to Luke. And Jesus goes to the temple and reads from the scroll of Isaiah. And he reads, I have good news for the poor. And for the blind, their sight will be restored. And this is the year of God's favor. And we talked about what that meant for us as Epiphanies. And then last week, again we are in Luke, and we have the story of the prophet not accepted in the prophet's hometown. And that appears in all of the Synoptic Gospels, but only in Luke does Luke add the two other stories, the one from 1 Kings and the one from 2 Kings. The one about the widows to whom God went and relieved their suffering, and the one about the leper to whom God went, even though he was a foreigner and a commander of an army against them, and relieved him of his leprosy. And we talked about how there were no more insiders and outsiders with Jesus. It was just us. And that was our epiphany. And now this week we have this fish story. Some of the commentators say the main character in it is Peter. Do y'all think that's true? I mean, we do hear his name 5 times or something. So maybe Peter's the one that has the epiphany. And his first epiphany is, this guy doesn't know squat about fishing. He wants us to set out into deep water. Let's go out into deep water. Let's get into this really deeply. And I think that's significant. Writers talk about Luke's gospel as being very intentional in its details. So Jesus invites Peter, and by proxy, us, to go out into deep water. And at that point in the story, Peter calls him master, or in some translations, teacher. But when they come back with the 2 boats sinking because of the fish they've caught, he kneels at Jesus' feet, and now he calls him Lord. And Peter has that epiphany. I think the epiphany for us is in the language. Do you all remember singing, if you were little Protestant children and you went and did camp songs, Fishers of Men? Catholic kids didn't sing those. I don't know about Lutheran kids and Presbyterian kids, but okay, remember that song? And then the very first time we sang it here, we sang Fishers of Them, because we were inclusifying our language. Which I think is very cool. If you listen to the news lately, there's a lot of inclusifying going on in the newscasts. El Roker was talking about the men and women who went out into the storm to restore power yesterday on a newscast, which I found very interesting. And there's more of that. Just seems to be kind of finally catching on, this notion of including people. So here we are in this boat with Peter, who now has this concept of Jesus is Lord. And Jesus says to him, do not be afraid, for now you will be catching people. In the other Gospels, the term is, you will be fishers of men, or fishers of people, we would say. But that's not what Luke says. In Luke, Jesus says, you will be catching people. And so some of the commentators go nuts with this and go off onto this evangelization thing where we're all going to go out and we're all going to catch people and grab them and bring them to church and all this kind of stuff. But I think catch has a different meaning. Here at Faith Family, when we wrote our initial vision statement 3.5 years ago in the living room of a friend of ours, what we said was we would be sanctuary. What we said was whoever comes through these doors will know that he or she has found sanctuary. And so when we catch people, we don't grab them and catch them as they're running away. We catch them as they are falling. We catch them as they need to be caught with strong arms and gentle arms. But we catch one another. And I think that's our epiphany today as Faith Family. So many have talked about in our prayer for people today how this is family. And we've talked about it on other days. This is my family. You are my brothers and sisters. Or grandmothers and grandfathers, depending on how old we are. And here's the deal. Fishing in the first century was a common, ordinary kind of life to have. For Jesus to use this metaphor, to Luke to record it, or for this to become part of the gospel, was an event that people would understand. Peter was a regular guy, kind of like us. Not too smart, smart enough. Knew what he was doing, but he could still be surprised. One of the commentators, and I love this, so I'll read it to you, Mary Hinkle says, when Jesus speaks to Peter at the end, he doesn't say, "Buck up, little buddy, you're not so bad." What he says is, stop being afraid. We have work to do. Stop being afraid. We have work to do. And the work we have to do is to catch one another when we need arms that will hold us up when we would fall. We catch one another, not in any selfish way, not in any desperate way, but in the most imaginable, loving way that God has caught each and every one of us. We have been caught. We've been out in the deep water. And we weren't left there alone to buck up, bucko. We were brought back in safety to shore, where there would be abundance for all. And in Luke, we're only asked to give up everything. I think what that means is that we know when somebody needs us. We know when everything we're asked to give up might be dog food for an animal shelter, or boots for those who have none. It might be $1 you give to somebody collecting for the disabled veterans. It might be money you throw into someone's tin as he sits in the cold playing his harmonica for any who will listen. Those were my experiences yesterday. Every moment is an epiphany. If, as we sang, we open our eyes and our ears to listen, we open our eyes to see what each of us needs and to offer that. And when I see people in smiles of joy during our shared prayer and Hug Fest, and when I see people in tears being held close and hugged by those who love them, I know we get this epiphany. It is ours every moment of our existence. There is always someone who needs something of us. And I don't want to say if only our prayer, because to me that is the biggest thing we most often give others. So let us this week open our eyes, open our ears, open our hearts, and offer our prayer and whatever else we are called to offer as we catch one another and those that will be put in our paths to be caught, held with strength, but caught in gentleness, as God has caught each of us. Because after God caught us, God held us to God's own heart and loved us. Let us take that love and share it. Amen. BBL's above in 2 weeks.